Welcome everyone to today's Explainer. We're jumping right into some dark, damp territory today, a place most of us honestly prefer to completely ignore. Yep, we're talking about the crawl space right beneath your feet. It might be out of sight, out of mind, but if the wood moisture down there gets out of control, well, the health and structural integrity of your entire house is on the line. So today we're going to dig into the actual science of wood moisture to find the absolute perfect sweet spot for your home's foundation.
All right, let's dive right in. Here's our roadmap for this explainer. First, why wood moisture matters. Second, Mother Nature's ideal range. Third, temperature, humidity, and wood. And finally, number 4, finding the humidity sweet spot.
So the big question right off the bat, what exactly is an acceptable moisture content for crawl space wood? Look, I know, nobody really wants to spend their weekends stressing about the structural beams in their crawl space, but those beams are literally holding up your life. Getting the moisture content right is the difference between a house that stands rock solid for generations and one that just slowly rots from the ground up. Okay, moving right into section 1, why wood moisture matters and the high stakes involved. Let's look at what happens when we just leave this space to fend for itself. If moisture gets out of control down there, you're essentially rolling out the red carpet for some pretty nasty enemies. According to the Weyerhaeuser technical resource sheet, we're finding 2 main things here. The first is mold or fungal growth, which, can completely tank the air quality inside your actual living space. The second is wood rot or decay. If decay-producing organisms take hold, they will literally eat away at your joists until you're dealing with total structural loss. And honestly, there is no bigger homeowner nightmare than that.
So the crucial number you've got to remember is 19%. Research shows that hitting a moisture content greater than 19% provides exactly what mold and those decay-producing organisms need to actively thrive. If the wood in your crawl space crosses that 20% line, your home is absolutely in the danger zone. The whole game here is keeping our levels well below this red line. That brings us to section 2, Mother Nature's ideal range, focusing on equilibrium moisture. What if, instead of fighting nature with all this heavy machinery, we actually just followed her lead? These right here are our magic numbers. Most research points to an ideal, healthy crawl space wood moisture content of between 10% and 16%. And why is that? Because it turns out Mother Nature has her own building codes. This isn't just some random target we came up with. This is the natural, healthy state for wood when it's just sitting in an outdoor environment. To really wrap our heads around this, we need to talk about EMC, or equilibrium moisture content. Think of wood kind of like a giant sponge. It naturally adjusts its own internal moisture to match the air around it. The USDA's Forest Products Laboratory actually did a massive study on this across the US, and they found that, year-round, the EMC generally falls right into that 10 to 16% pocket. Obviously, you'll see extremes in, say, the deserts of Nevada or the freezing cold of Alaska. But everywhere else, it's remarkably consistent, with only a 2 to 3% seasonal variance. So wood naturally sitting at this moisture level is totally normal, even when it's under your house. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Hey, isn't bone-dry wood always better? Actually, no. We need to bust that myth right now. Lower is definitely not always better. Sometimes people set their crawl-space dehumidifiers so low that they basically turn the place into the Sahara Desert. When wood drops way below 10%, it gets incredibly brittle. It shrinks, it cracks, and it splits. And guess where you usually notice that first? Right upstairs as big, ugly gaps in your expensive hardwood floors. We are looking for balance here, not a desert. Let's transition into section 3, temperature, humidity, and wood. This is the delicate dance going on between the air and your structural beams. A lot of people try to oversimplify this by just talking about humidity, but you can't really understand humidity without temperature. They're totally locked together. So just to keep the math straightforward for this explainer, we're going to anchor our temperature at 70 degrees Fahrenheit, which is a super common baseline for a summer crawl space. Keeping that steady lets us see exactly what happens to the wood when the humidity shifts around.
Now, what's really fascinating about this slide is how clearly it shows that relationship. This is straight from the Forest Products Laboratory data. If you check out the relative humidity on the left and the wood moisture content on the right, you see them climb right alongside each other. At a super dry 30% humidity, your wood is parched at 6.2%. But as we move up to 60 or 70% humidity, the wood hits that gorgeous 11 to 13% range. But look out at 90%. That's when the wood crosses that 19% danger threshold we talked about earlier, hitting 20.5%. It's literally the Goldilocks effect, right? 30% humidity leaves the wood way too dry, putting your flooring at risk. 90% is way too wet, inviting in the rot and mold. But 70% humidity? That puts the wood at 13.1% moisture, which is sitting perfectly in the middle of Mother Nature's 10 to 16% sweet spot.
Which tees us up perfectly for Section 4, finding the humidity sweet spot. Let's translate all of this science into a real-world target zone for your home.
If you take away just one thing today, I want it to be this. Wood moisture levels remain in their ideal range of 10 to 16% when relative humidity is between 55% and 75%. Seriously, burn that into your memory. That is your target zone. If you can keep your crawl space humidity hovering in that 55 to 75% window long term, you are actively winning the fight against fungal growth and structural rot.
And this brilliantly illustrates the biggest mistake homeowners make. We're so conditioned to how we manage the air inside our living spaces, right? Up in the living room, you want low humidity, like 30 to 50%, using AC or humidifiers, but you have to remember, your foundation is not your living room. Trying to apply indoor HVAC logic to a dirt floor crawl space is a massive mistake. Down there, we need to follow Mother Nature's 55 to 75% rule.
Crazy enough, a lot of professionals in the industry actually get this wrong. They see 55% humidity and think, okay, that's the absolute maximum. So they install these massive dehumidifiers to force the crawl space to stay under 55% all year long. But the science proves that's just totally backwards. Trying to match your indoor levels down there is completely unrealistic. It crushes your energy bill, and it does absolutely nothing extra for the health of your wood. Remember, 55% humidity is the floor of our ideal range, not the ceiling. So how do you actually pull this off without army crawling under your house every week with a moisture meter? Well, systems like ATMOX are literally built around this exact scientific algorithm. You have a central controller constantly monitoring the temperature and humidity. You can even add sensors that track the wood moisture directly, and then instead of blasting a dehumidifier 24/7 on some super low setting, the system is smart. It only runs the fans or dehumidifier when it actually needs to, just to keep the wood in that golden 10 to 16% range. It's incredibly efficient. Which brings us to our final thought, to wrap up today's explainer. I really want you to ask yourself, is your crawl space working with Mother Nature or fighting against her? Are you blowing money on energy trying to create a bone-dry desert and risking your hardwood floors? Or are you just hoping for the best, letting humidity soar into the 90s and inviting rot into your joists? Once you understand equilibrium moisture, you can hit that 10 to 16% sweet spot and know for sure your home is going to stand strong for decades.